Namaste everyone. Today is Natural Equilibrium Group 31st webinar, and the topic is Srimad Bhagavad Gita, a contemporary perspective, and how we can look at the Gita from the modern perspective, talked by Dr. Vikram. Yeah, Vikramji, over to you.
All right, thank you, Sudhir, for inviting me once again. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. You should see the screen now, which says Srimad Bhagavad Gita, a contemporary view. Sudhir, the voice is okay and you can see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Now you can put everybody on mute. So if people will mute themselves and not unmute themselves would be great. I have a total of about 7 slides worth of material, okay? I mean, I have 7 slides, but the material will be more than that. I will keep talking. So I'll explain to you some of the things that are on the slide. First, the disclaimer as always, all information, content and material presented here are for your information and not intended to be a critique on anyone's belief system. So if you believe something that is different from what I'm saying, don't worry about it. I'm not trying to change your belief system. And you have to bear with me also. The presenter, that's me, I'm presenting only my personal experience. I don't expect anyone to agree with me. The viewer or listener may take from this presentation what is suitable for him or her. So what suits you, you take. What does not suit you, it's okay. And let go of what does not suit you. All right. So that's the spirit in which I'm talking about this Gita here. All right. So first we will talk about what is Gita. Then why do we need to study Gita? What is the philosophy of Gita? Gita talks about 4 different paths of achieving the same goal. That goal is basically realizing who we are, and only then we achieve fulfillment. And then some concluding remarks, and then I'll take some questions, so we'll discuss. I don't come here with the arrogance that what I'm saying is right and what I'm saying is the only truth. This is the truth as I see it. Okay, truth can be seen by different people differently, and each person's perspective is correct from their perspective. So therefore, I don't claim to know the entire truth, and whatever I tell you, that is the only truth or that is the truth. No, I'm telling you my experience of and my perspective of truth. All right. So what is Gita? The literal meaning of Bhagavad Gita is Bhagavan's song. Gita means song and Bhagavad means Bhagwan's song. So who is Bhagavan? Bhagavan literally means somebody who has Bhaga. Bhaga means there are 6 qualities described as Bhaga, you know, infinite wealth, infinite opulence, infinite wisdom, infinite glory, and also renunciation. There are 6 qualities of Bhagavan. So whoever has these 6 qualities is called a Bhagavan. All right. If you look at the Gita, if you read any version of Gita, it will say Arjuna Uvacha, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, Sanjay Uvacha, and Bhagavan Uvacha. It never says Bhagavan Krishna Uvacha, because the personal Krishna is not saying all this. Okay, the person of Krishna is not saying all this, but Bhagavan, who is the embodiment of the whole, he is the one who is saying all this. So that's why it says Bhagavan Uvacha. All right, so let's talk about the historical context. See, history means his story, right? His story, the way the word in Sanskrit, it means itihasa. Itihasa means this is how it was. That's what itihasa means. All right. So what is the historical context of this Gita? Gita was narrated, or it was told by Bhagavan to Arjuna in the battle of Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is a huge epic, we all know, and Gita is a small portion of that Mahabharata. Okay. In the Mahabharata, the story goes like this. The Kauravas and the Pandavas, sons of 2 real brothers. The sons of Dhritarashtra, the elder brother, are called Kauravas, 100 brothers. And the sons of Pandu, the second brother, are called Pandavas. Okay, so these cousins, Kauravas and Pandavas, they actually fight for a piece of land which is called Hastinapura, and that Hastinapura is what is currently the Delhi area. Okay, and this war actually happened in a place called Kurukshetra. That Kurukshetra exists even now. Okay, so this is a historical fact. The Mahabharata war actually happened at Kurukshetra between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. So that is the historical context. Okay, the Kauravas had a huge army. Okay, they say in the Gita it is described as 11 Akshohini, which is a huge number. And then Pandavas had 7 Akshohini, which was comparatively lower number. All right. But the Pandavas had the advantage of having Krishna as the guide for Arjuna, who was the general of the army. So Arjuna was the chief, army chief, who was fighting the war on behalf of Pandavas. And his guide, his charioteer was Krishna. Okay, so Krishna said that I will give my army, the physical army, I will give to one side, and I will be personally on another side. So Duryodhana, who was the leader of the Kauravas, he said that I would love to have the army, because he wanted all the army, the strength to fight the war. Okay, but Arjuna was happy to have Krishna on his side. Okay? He didn't care for the big army. As long as Krishna was on his side, he was happy. Then Arjuna was actually 86 years old when this war happened, and Krishna was 89 years old. They were actually first cousins. Krishna's father and Arjuna's mother, they were brother and sister. So they were first cousins. Arjuna and Krishna were first cousins. All their life, they grew up together as cousins, as good friends, and until age 86, Arjuna kept looking at Krishna as a friend, as a brother, never really understood his divinity fully. Whereas Krishna was actually the divinity incarnate. All right, the way Krishna was born, the way his entire life was, it was all essentially divine. Okay, there are many stories about Krishna's life. You can read them elsewhere. But here we are going to focus on the Gita. I'm telling you all this because there is a context. This is the context for the Gita. Arjuna was one of the greatest warriors of his life, of his time, and never lost a battle. So when the war started, then Arjuna told his charioteer, the Lord himself, Krishna, he said, Krishna, why don't you take me in the middle of the battleground and show me who has come to fight me, who dares fight with me. That was the kind of attitude Arjuna had. So Krishna took his chariot in the middle of the two armies, not in front of Duryodhana and Dushyasana, who were the sworn enemies, okay, but in front of Bhishmacharya and Dronacharya. Bhishmacharya was the general of the Kaurava army. He was the Pitamaha. He was actually the eldest brother in the earlier generation. So he was like the great uncle for Arjuna. And Dronacharya was the guru of Arjuna, as well as many warriors in that battle who had taught everybody archery. So then Krishna told him, listen, you don't have to fight your enemies. You have to fight these people. So Arjuna said, how can I fight my own people? How can I fight Bhishmacharya, who is my uncle? And how can I fight Dronacharya, who is my guru? Which means what? See, Arjuna had grown up. He grew up fighting. Okay, he was a Kshatriya. He was the administrative and the fighting kind. All right. He was one of the rulers. So fighting and ruling over the world was in his blood. Okay. So therefore, fighting was not a problem for him. Killing somebody was also not a problem for him because he had killed so many people in battles in the past. All right. But when he saw his own uncle and his own guru, then there was a problem. So if it was somebody else's guru or somebody else's uncle, he would have killed. That was also not a problem. But then When he saw his own uncle and his own guru, then there was a doubt in his mind. How can I kill these people? So this doubt was created in the mind of Krishna by Arjuna himself. So that is the identity crisis I'm going to talk about. So the identity crisis is whenever there is a life-changing event or a life-threatening event in our life, we start questioning, why is this happening to me? Who am I? So when this question comes into our mind, that is when our situation becomes like the Arjuna. Okay, so Arjuna is basically an embodiment of the identity crisis we each feel. Okay, then because of that identity crisis, we forget what is our duty. So on the battlefield, Arjuna's duty was to fight and to win the war. But then he suddenly became somebody's disciple and somebody's nephew, and then he forgot his duty. That is what happens to many of us many times. Then what is my life's goal? So these are the things that come in our mind also. But then how do we get over all of this? So how to achieve this? So this is all the subject of Gita. That is what Gita is. It is basically a manual for the art of living. That's why we read the Gita. So why Gita? See, Gita helps us at 3 levels. Okay. Number one, it helps us at the Adi Bhautik level, which is the material level, at the level of the material world. And if we follow the principles of the Gita, then we are materially prosperous. Our life, not just my life, but everybody's life is prosperous. So we all work for prosperity, do we not? We all think that we should have enough to eat, we should have a nice house to live, we should have a good job, we should have a good family. All of these things can be achieved if we understand the message of the Gita. So Gita helps us at the Adi Bhautik level. The second level is the Adi Daivik level. Adi Daivik is the level of the experience. All right. So Adi Bhautik means the object of experience. Adi Daivik means the experience itself. All right. So what kind of experience do we desire? We desire happiness. Do we not? Whatever we do in life, we do because we want to achieve happiness. We want to be happy. So when a child grows up, the child wants to study up to high school and they want to graduate from high school. Okay? Because they think that when I graduate from high school, then I'll be happy. But then that happiness lasts only for a short time. Then we pursue something else. We go to college because we think that after going to college, then we will be happy. So yes, 4 years we go to college and we realize that actually being in the college is not all that great. You have to study hard and all that. So at the end of it, we graduate after 4 years. Then we are happy for a short time. Then we want a job. Then we think that after we get a job, we'll be happy. But then when we get a job, we realize how many challenges there are in the job. Okay, but we have a job now, we are getting some money. Now we want to get married. So all of these things are pursued to become happy. So how to achieve that? That also the Gita will tell us. And then at the third level, it's at the experiencer level. So we have talked about the object of experience, the Adi Bhautik, the experience itself, the Adi Daivik, and now we focus on the experiencer, which is the Adhyatmic level. So at the Adhyatmic level, Gita will lead us to inner transformation. Okay. So the experiencer will transform. You see, earlier we are in the impression, or we are under the impression that we are this body. And because of our identification with the body, we think that we are, man, woman, old, young, whatever. All right. And then because of this body identification, there are relations. So Arjuna thinks that this body or this person happens to be my guru, this person happens to be they are only connected with this body. All right. So then when we start questioning all these things, When we move our attention from the object of experience, from the experience to the experiencer, that's when our spiritual pursuit or whatever we are trying to achieve will eventually lead to fulfillment. And we will go over that in the next few slides. Let's look at the philosophy of the Gita. See, there are three fundamental things we need to understand from the Gita. If we wanted to get only three things from the Gita, these are the three things we should understand. Number one, I am not the Deha or this perishable body. See, this body is actually continuously changing. All right, this is perishable. Whatever comes into existence will go out of existence. All right. So this body is changing every moment. Even as I speak to you, some molecules of carbon dioxide are going out of my mouth, out of my breath, out with my breath. And as I breathe in, some molecules of oxygen are coming in. So some material from outside, some material from the air is becoming a part of my body. And some material of my body is becoming, the air once again. Is it not? So this is perishing all the time. This is changing all the time. So I'm not this changing body, but I'm essentially Atman. Atman, which is the unperishable, eternal, unchanging, pure consciousness. You see, the same young boy who goes to primary school, then he goes to high school, then he goes to college, then he goes to university, then he gets married, he has his own children, and he's talking to you right now. There is no change in my awareness of who I am. I am, that awareness has not changed in all these years. What I was, 50 years ago, I'm the same even now. Okay, that awareness of who I am has not changed. My body has changed, the world has changed, everything has changed around me. Everything keeps changing around me all the time. But I have not changed. That unchanging eternal principle, that's me. Now, most of us don't realize this. Most of us think that I'm this body. Say, I'm young, I'm old, I'm rich, I'm poor, whatever. This is all connected with this body. All right. But how can I realize my essential nature? I can realize my essential nature by living according to Swadharma. So this Swadharma is a concept explained in the Gita with great clarity. Swadharma is what is my natural duty at any given time. Who am I at, whichever location, whichever time, and what is my duty at that time? That is also according to the natural law. So when I am a child, then as a child, my natural duty is to study. So that is called the Brahmacharya ashram or the student stage in as it is described in our scriptures. Okay. The next stage becomes the householder stage. As I grow old, I finish my education, I start working for a living, then I have a family, then I support my family, I support my parents, I support my children, I support the society. So that is the Grihastha ashram or the householder stage of my life. So my duty has changed. Okay. So the Swadharma, which was in the childhood or which was in the student stage, that has changed now. That has become something else. Now, as I grow older, my children grow older, they become adults, then I take a back seat. Then I go into the next phase of my life, which is called the Vanaprastha. Okay, so this is the third stage of life, which is getting ready to, in literally, literal meaning says Vanaprastha means getting ready to go to the forest. Going to the forest means going away from society and getting ready for the next stage of life, complete renunciation, from where even the attachment to the body is discarded and the body itself is discarded when the time comes. That is called sannyasa. So these are 4 different stages of life through which everybody goes. Also, there are 4 types of tendencies or attitudes people have. So some people may have the attitude of studying and contemplating and all that. So if somebody has that kind of attitude predominantly in them, then we will call them a Brahmana. Somebody may have another attitude of, ruling this world, administering and all that. So these people are Kshatriyas. This is the natural tendency of every person. So people who have that kind of tendency as a majority tendency, then, or a predominant tendency, then they become administrators, they become rulers, they become military generals, and so on. So these are called the Kshatriyas. These are not castes. These are not jati. This is just a classification of how people are. This is just the way it is. Okay, so nobody is born a Kshatriya, nobody is born a Brahmin, nobody is born a Vaishya. So the third category of people is people who will do trading, who will do business. Okay, so they will make sure that the economy is running, they will run all kinds of businesses, they will run them for profit. Absolutely no problem. But as long as that profit making is not against the interest of the society in general, or the environment, or the earth, or other species, then that business is okay. And then there is a fourth category of people who want to be followers. So who follow the instructions given by the other three kinds of people. If this is just the tendency of the people, there is no reason to believe or to think or to say that one category of people are superior to the other. It's like the body, right? So there is a head, there are hands, there are limbs, there is a stomach, and there are feet. All right. So are they superior or inferior to each other? They are all contributing to the entire body, are they not? So if the head starts thinking that I'm superior to the feet, that's no good, because if the feet stop working, then the head cannot do anything, isn't it? The body won't be able to move at all. So therefore, all kinds of people are required for smooth running of a society. So there are 4 stages in life, and there are 4 kinds of people. Okay, so this is called ashram and varna. Okay, chatur varna and 4 ashrams. So these are the classifications of how people are, how the society is, and how our own evolution or how our own swadharma changes from time to time. So all of these things we understand, and when we understand them properly, then there is no superior or inferior. All right, we are all equal. That kind of equanimity, that kind of equality develops within our own heart. Now the Gita talks about 4 paths. Okay, so this is also how we ourselves evolve. Okay, so when we are children, we are very grossly body identified. Okay, so we all think that we are this body, we are inside the body, and outside the body is the world, because we see the world with our eyes, we experience the world with our eye, with all 5 senses, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, and the touch, right? So while we are in this body identification, then what? Then we have to use this body for the benefit of humanity, which means we fulfill our duty, we follow our duty, we follow our swadharma in the spirit of service. How do we do the spirit of service? We do the spirit of service with complete involvement, full commitment, full passion, but then don't expect the results of that duty or that service for any selfish desire. Okay, so the most famous verse in the Gita is in chapter 2, Karmani eva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbhu mate sangostva akarmani. That is the verse most people quote most often, but it is also the most misunderstood verse. Okay, the way we are explained this verse normally or typically by people is, you should do your duty, your right is only to your duty, and you have no right to the consequences or the phala or the fruits of your action, of your duty. Now this is a wonderful way to keep people serving you, and they will not expect anything in return. All right, so the ruling class can tell you this thing and ask you to do this, and it will be beneficial for them. It's not like this. Okay, the word adhikara does not mean right. Okay, in this context, the word adhikara does mean right. So when we say this is my adhikar, means this is my right, that is okay in that context. But the word adhikara in this verse actually means control. Adhikara means control. So I have control over my duty, but I do not have any control over the fruits of my actions. Which means what? See, action is always performed in the present. All right. But the fruits of the action will happen in the future. So is the future here yet? The future is not here yet. So my control is only over the present. My control is only over my actions in the present moment. The fruits of this present action are going to be born in the future, over which I don't have any control. In the sense, the actions I do now, they will produce certain results in the future, but those results are produced according to the natural law. It is also called the law of karma, which means what? Whatever I sow, I shall reap. Which means if I sow the wheat crop, I'm not going to expect a rice crop out of it. So if I sow the seeds of wheat, I cannot get the rice crop, right? So that is what the law of karma means. Whatever you shall sow, that is what you can reap. So if you do good actions, if you do actions that are beneficial for everybody, then the results of that action will be good. If you do actions for your own selfish interest, you will get the results accordingly. About that, there is no doubt. If you work hard, if you want to work hard and make a lot of money, you will make money. About that, there is no doubt. All right. But when you undertake an action, when you undertake any activity with selfish desires, even though you get the results of that action or that result will not fulfill you completely. So our entire life is spent on fulfilling all kinds of desires. But then we don't really experience fulfillment, because once one desire is fulfilled, another desire crops up, another desire crops up. So there is no end to desires. Okay. So therefore, as long as we are identified with the body, we continue to do our actions with selflessness. Okay. So when we include the entire society, when we are trying to do any activity or any action, and we think of how it will benefit the larger society, then that kind of activity is much more fulfilling than when we undertake any activity just to fulfill our own selfish desires. That's what karma yoga means. Okay. The next path is yoga. This is also called dhyana yoga, or some people will call it raja yoga. It mainly talks about discipline and focus. All right. So I actually did a webinar on yoga the previous week, in which we spoke about how we discipline our mind through yoga. So even if you want to achieve anything in the world, if you want to be a good sportsman, if you want to be a good successful businessman, if you want to do anything in life, you want to be a musician or whatever, you have to have focus, you have to have discipline. Only then you can succeed. So to achieve anything in the world with our body, you have to have a healthy body, a healthy mind, and a focused mind, a disciplined mind. So those are the paths of karma and yoga. So once we start working in the world, then we realize that yes, we have to have discipline and focus. So we pursue that. As we pursue this with selflessness, with focus, with discipline, we start realizing that, it's not just our own effort that is bearing all the fruit, but there are many other things that are coming together to make sure that the fruit is happening. So we start realizing within our own self that there is a higher power that is all pervasive, that is working throughout this universe, which is somehow helping me, which is aiding me. So we start developing a sense of reverence, or a sense of awe, or a sense of devotion towards that higher power. This sense within us is actually called bhakti. Bhakti does not mean you go to the temple and do bhajan kirtan, or you do some kind of puja pothi, you do arti and all that. That is not bhakti. That is called upasana. Upasana means the activity you do through which bhakti, or the experience of love or devotion, will appear within your heart. So bhakti is an experience. Bhakti is not action. So once you start doing karma yoga, once you discipline your mind through raja yoga or dhyana yoga, then bhakti will develop within your own heart. Okay. So this is actually sequentially described in the Gita. So karma is described in the first 6 chapters, and the 6th chapter is on yoga. Okay, and then thereafter the bhakti portion of the Gita is described. So from chapter 7 through 12, it's all bhakti yoga. So through this bhakti or through this devotion or through this upasana, at the end of it, we start wondering, the deity whom I was worshipping. So the people who are devotees of Krishna will have the image of Krishna in their mind when they do the bhakti or when they do the upasana. The people who are worshippers of Rama, they will worship Rama. Or the people who are worshippers of Buddha, they might worship Buddha, or even Christians will worship Jesus Christ. So this is all devotion towards the divinity personified as Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Christ. At the end of it, we will start wondering who this deity is. So we will want to know that deity. So we want to understand the nature of that deity. Once we start understanding the nature of that deity, we start realizing that that deity and me are not really different from each other. And then my separateness, my identity actually gets dissolved in the identity of the deity, and they both become one. Okay? So ultimately, there is no difference between my own self, my own Atman, and the Paramatman, who is the controller of this entire universe. So that is knowledge. That is called jnana. So jnana is from 13, 14, 15 chapters. And in the 15th chapter, it gives a condensed version of the entire knowledge of the Vedas. So therefore, fulfillment happens in the 15th chapter, which is the summary of the Vedic wisdom. See, Vedas are the knowledge which is contained in this entire universe. Okay? This knowledge simply exists. All we do is we discover this knowledge. We don't invent any knowledge. Okay? In one of the webinars, I had said that Newton's laws, we all of us know Newton's laws, right? Newton did not make those laws. Newton simply discovered those laws. The laws have always been. All right. In the same manner, knowledge has always been in the universe. All we are doing is only discovering that knowledge. All right. So the entire wisdom of the Vedas is condensed in the end portion of the Vedas, which is called the Vedanta, or the end portion. And the Vedanta is basically all the Upanishads. Okay? Upanishads are short stories in different Vedas. So those Upanishads are called Vedanta. So the summary or the wisdom or the knowledge portion of the Vedas is in the Upanishads or Vedanta. Now, the knowledge of all the Upanishads has been condensed or extracted in the Gita. So Gita is also considered as an Upanishad. Okay? And all the knowledge of the Gita is condensed or extracted in chapter 15. So that is why this chapter 15 is called the Purushottam Yoga, which is the fulfillment of human life. So if we contemplate only on this chapter, understand this chapter fully, and incorporate the teachings of this chapter in our daily life, then we can achieve fulfillment. That is the declaration of this chapter. So in this chapter, there are no questions and answers. See, most of the Gita, the entire Gita from chapter 1 through 18, it's all questions and answers. So Arjuna will ask a question. Krishna, how is this like this? And then Krishna will answer. So Bhagavan Uvacha, he will say. But this chapter actually starts with Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. This entire chapter is only what Bhagavan has said. These are the words that have come from the divine, and they are going to explain to us 4 different things. See, these are the 4 different misunderstandings we have in our life all the time. So we have a misunderstanding about this world. What is this world? We have a misunderstanding about who is the jiva or the individual. Then we have a misunderstanding about who is the Ishvara. And we have a misunderstanding about what is spiritual practice. Okay. So all these 4 misunderstandings are basically cleared if we study the 15th chapter with focus. So see, we have the misunderstanding that we are this body, right? But how did this body come about? This body is made up of elements that have always been here. So if you look at the body, it is made up of different organs, right? Those different organs are made up of different molecules, macromolecules, like proteins and carbohydrates and fats and things like that. Thereafter, if you look further into the molecules, they are made out of different atoms. Okay. And these atoms are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons. All right. So when these electrons, protons, and neutrons come together in a certain number and certain manner, that's when that thing becomes a particular element. So for example, when there is only 1 electron and 1 proton, it becomes hydrogen. If there are 2, then it becomes helium. If there are 8, it becomes oxygen. So 1 oxygen atom and 2 hydrogen atoms, when they come together, if you add the electrons, protons, and neutrons, they will all add up. But what is created is water, which is completely different from either hydrogen or oxygen. Oxygen, hydrogen, and water, all 3 have different properties altogether, right? So this entire world, including our body, is made up of these 3 fundamental particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons, right? So the way they come together and the number in which they come together, that makes the thing appear different. So when these 3 things are in the soil, we call it soil or clay. When the same things are transformed through the process of photosynthesis, that same thing becomes food. We call it a banana, we call it a mango, or we call it something else. And then when that same material we eat, this is created. So this is also essentially clay. Okay. So the body is basically made up of material, isn't it? So is this what I am? Is this who I am? I don't have any experience of change, but this is changing all the time, right? So therefore, this material body, which was created from the elements which have always been here, I cannot be that. Okay. So this is changing all the time, but I don't have any experience of change, right? Then I have a misunderstanding about what this world is. Okay, so how do I experience the world? In one of the previous webinars, I have told that the world is experienced through our senses, right? So you are seeing me on the screen right now, or you are listening to me through your phone or through your device. I'm speaking to you from Pennsylvania, but you are experiencing that within yourself, right? So unless you experience it within yourself, you won't even know I'm speaking, right? So I've said in the past that the world creates an impression in our mind, right? And until that impression is created, the world doesn't really exist for us. So when we are asleep, then the world disappears, isn't it? So for that experience to happen of the world, the mind has to be active, the sense organs have to be active, and they have to engage with the world. Only then that experience will happen. Then we will know that there is a world, right? So the world is a reflection of our own mind. Okay. So when we understand the world in this manner, then, as I said, 3 things will happen. 1, we will not be afraid of the world. Secondly, we will not have any attachment or any craving for the world. And thirdly, we won't try to correct it, because you cannot correct a mirror image. You cannot correct a reflection, because the reflection doesn't exist, right? The only thing you can correct is yourself. So this is the understanding you get once you study the 15th chapter. Then the third concept, the third misunderstanding is about Ishvara, or the controller of this universe. You know, we may call it God, we may call it Paramatma, we may call it Brahman. What is it? We have a complete misunderstanding about that. So that misunderstanding is cleared when we study the 15th chapter. And then what is the practice? Okay, I mean, we've understood all these concepts, we've understood all this big philosophy, but how do I bring it in my own life? So there are 5 things we need to do. Okay. Those 5 things are very clearly indicated in this chapter. Bhagwan says Nirmana moha means I should not have any attachment to mana. Mana means measurement. So no attachment, no craving for measurement. See, we measure ourselves in time, space, and object. How do we do that? We say that my date of birth is such and such, which means what? I have assumed that before that date, I did not exist. Okay, so that is measuring myself in time. Okay, is it true or not? Nobody questions. Everybody thinks that before the date of birth, I did not exist, right? That is a misunderstanding. Secondly, space. Space means what? I'm 6 feet by 2 feet. I'm occupying this much space. So as if I'm limiting myself to this, and beyond this, I don't exist. That is another misunderstanding. And then the third thing is object. I have weighed myself and I weigh 65 kilos. Okay. Is that what I am? Is that who I am? So we limit ourselves in time, space, and object. Nirmana moha. Don't measure yourself in these three things. Then the second thing is Jita Sangha dosha. Jita Sangha dosha means, Sangha dosh means the vikar or the imperfection we experience through attachment to objects. Okay. See, we consider ourselves to be incomplete, and we try to make ourselves complete by adding things to us. So say I have this phone, okay? So until I had this phone, I thought that unless I have this phone, I'm not complete. Okay? So I have this sense of incompleteness. So if I have this sense of incompleteness, I try to make myself complete by attaching myself to things. So this is the Sangha dosha. So I have to go beyond that. So Nirmana moha, Jita Sangha dosha. Then the third thing is Adhyatma Nitya. Adhyatma Nitya means always focusing on the self. We talked about the Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik, and Adhyatmik. So Adhyatmik is concerning the self, the true self. So even this conversation we are having right now is basically Adhyatma Nitya, or focusing on the self. Okay. Then Vinivritta Kamaha. Vinivritta Kamaha means going beyond or getting rid of or retiring from kamana or desires. So going beyond desires, Vinivritta Kamaha. See, this will happen to you when you realize that you are complete by yourself. You are not incomplete, as you have misunderstood. And then the fifth thing is Dvandvair Vimuktaha Sukha Dukkha Sanyaihi. Sukha Dukkha are basically happiness and misery. These are the two experiences we have. All right. So we always want to achieve happiness and we want to prevent misery. This is what we are doing all the time, are we not? So we have to go beyond that. Dvandvair Vimuktaha means we have to rid ourselves of, or we have to become free of these two experiences. So then what do? We take both happiness and misery in the same stride. So if something good happens to us, then we remain calm. We don't get, on cloud 9 or cloud 11 or whatever. And when something bad happens, we don't become dejected. This is just the way it is. And you do the best in the given situation, but don't crave for, this is going to change and something good is going to happen and then I will be happy. No, don't do that. Whatever you need to do in whatever your situation is, do that with happiness from within, express happiness from within. So that is the practice. That is how we need to live our life. Okay. At the end of it, Bhagavan says, Sarvasya chaham hridhi sannivishto matta smritir jnanam apohanancha vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo vedantakrut veda videva chaham. This is the 15th verse of the 15th chapter, which is the essence of all the Vedas. It says vedaischa sarvair ahameva vedyo. Knowing ourselves or knowing myself is the essence of all the Vedas. Vedaischa sarvai, all the Vedas, ahameva vedyo, knowing myself. Self-realization is the goal of all the Vedas. Says sarvasya cha aham means I am everywhere. Hridhi sannivishto means I am near your heart. Mattah means through me. Jnanam smritim apohanam cha. All four states of experience are illuminated by me, are because of me. Smriti means memory or the dream. Jnanam means knowledge or waking experience. Matta Smriti Jnanam Apohanam means forgetfulness, which means deep sleep, and Cha means samadhi. All of these four states of experience are illuminated by me. Okay? When I realize this, then this is the ultimate objective of all the Vedas. I am the maker of Vedanta, Vedanta Krut. I have created the Vedanta. Vedavid, Vedavideva Chaham. Vedavid, I am the knower of the Vedas. That's what the 15th verse tells us. And this is our essential nature. Now, once you study this chapter, once you inculcate all the principles of this chapter in our lives, then at the end of it, Bhagavan says, Iti guhyatamam shastram idam uktam maya nagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat kruta krutyascha bharata. So he says, I am telling you this most secret or subtlest of all knowledge. Iti guhyatamam shastram idam uktam maya nagha. Hey, Mayanagha means Arjuna's name is Mayanagha also, blemishless. That's what Mayanagha means. Etad buddhva buddhiman syat. Once you understand this, once this goes into your consciousness, he doesn't say Etad krutva buddhiman syat. You don't have to do anything. You just have to understand this. Kruta krutyascha bharata means at the end of it, you will feel kruta krutya means fulfilled. So this is the fulfillment of life. So once we understand the Gita in this manner, we are completely fulfilled. See, if Gita is a timeless text, which is what we are told, it should be relevant today as it has always been. And in my experience, it is. Gita guides us even today in our daily life, even today in the modern life, it guides us. It helps us live a peaceful and enjoyable life. It helps us experience the highest quality of life. And it helps us realize our essential nature, leading to fulfillment. So this is why we study the Gita, and this is how I have understood the Gita. This is how I have experienced it, and I'm happy to share this with you. I don't know how long it has been. It has been about 20 minutes. Great. No, sorry. It has been 50 minutes. We started at 9:30 my time. It's about 10:20 now. So I spoke much longer than I normally do, but I'll be happy to stay here and take questions as people might want to ask.
Yeah, it was a
I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. I'll give you my contact number. So by all means, contact me, and then I'll be happy to talk to you later. Go ahead, Sudhir.
Yeah. So far, I mean, the first question is why I included Bhagavad Gita in one of the natural equilibrium group activity. I don't know actually at the time. I started putting all the thoughts and ideas what I came to know, and and it went on like up to 70 to 75 activities, and Bhagavad Gita is one of them. And before giving the brief introduction, basically we grow up who know about Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, but we never experienced them. We never studied them in detail. I mean, our generation just came like that. And when we crossed the teenage and we entered the college level, in one of the teachings, one of the motivational speaker in our area and your locality mentioned, Lord Rama did his suicide by going to Saryu River. And I was under the impression that, okay, whatever he told, that is correct. Until at one point of time, I understood, okay, that is how Rama ended his human life. And he entered into divine adult. So at that time, I thought, okay, we are being misguided. People who don't know anything about, or who don't know very little about, they're adding all the masala and all the stuff. They're misguiding us. And then I observed like Bhagavad Gita is very good, and I mean the Lord Krishna told many things in that. But how people are using this? So people are using only when someone died in their home, then only they will pay the Gita. Other than that, they're not using at all. Then I understood, okay, something is wrong. Maybe I don't know how it will goes, why I put this natural equilibrium group activity, but you gave a simple explanation. You told many things in a very nutshell, so that people like us is a very good to start with.
Well, yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed what I said. As I said, you see, we all have a unique experience. So my experience is unique to me. Okay. Whatever experience I have had so far of the world and of myself, only I know. Nobody else knows that. So my experience of the world and my experience of myself is exclusively mine. And the way I experience the world is based on, my own state of mind, right? So it's very, very unique. In my experience, what I have understood is, if I purify myself. See, I'm an environmental engineer. So as an environmental engineer, the profession is you clean up the air, clean up the water, clean up the land, all those things, right? So while doing that, I said, if I'm going out there to clean the environment, should I not be clean from within first? So when I started working on that, I realized that I did not really need to clean the environment at all. I had to only clean myself. When I clean myself, the environment outside becomes clean automatically. I'm not saying me means me personally. You see, look at the entire humanity as one person. Okay? Because of this human means all 7.5 billion people. Okay, because of this human greed, see what has happened to the environmental quality. The air has become polluted, the water has become polluted, the land has become polluted, the forests are dwindling. We have done all kinds of damage to the environment as well as to any number of species, right? Then what did nature do to us? Nature shut us down for 2 months. During that, what happened? Air quality became great, water quality became great. All the species other than human beings, they became very free. You've seen videos going through WhatsApp and all over the place that wild animals are now coming into the cities and going all over the place because they are no longer afraid, because we had terrorized all of these other species. There was no reason for us to terrorize all the other species. Okay, we were the ones, because of our greed, because of our excessive activity on this planet, we were creating all kinds of pollution. So when this excessive activity was curtailed during this lockdown, what happened? The environment became pure. The environment has always been pure. We were the ones who created all kinds of imbalance and all kinds of pollution into it. But once we stopped this activity, then the purity of the environment manifested itself without any problem at all. So, am I an environmental engineer cleaning the environment? How do I become so arrogant? I cannot clean up the environment. The environment is clean by itself. I was the one polluting it. Okay. So once I stop polluting it, once I clear myself from within first, once I get rid of the greed from my own mind, then the environment becomes clean automatically. That is how I understood the Gita. That is how I understood my own profession. So when I undertake any activity or when I undertake an advisory role somewhere, then my advice to the client or to the industry or to whoever is wanting to develop a project is to make sure that the development happens in an eco-friendly manner. So the development activity will not have any adverse impact on the environment. That is the kind of advisory service I would undertake as an environmental engineer, as someone who is approaching this whole thing from the point of view of the Gita. Does that make sense?
Yeah, true. And one more thing. So for the beginners to learn more details, I mean, to do more study on Gita, to know more about it and experience it. So you prefer to have any guru, I mean, learn by through guru or any book you suggest?
You see, if you have a guru or if you know somebody who has incorporated the principles of Gita in his or her own life, it will be great if you can find such a person and talk to that person, learn from them. These days you can learn a lot of things from the internet also. But then if there is a live guru or if there is somebody you know who has incorporated these principles in their own life, then it is easier because you can check with them, you can ask them. The book will not give you all the answers. The book will only give you those answers that are printed in the book. But the live guru will give you answers. If you have any doubts, you can ask the guru will answer your questions. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's why it is good to have a guide. As I said in the past, I have learned a lot, and I keep learning from a person who does not consider himself a guru, who has no disciples, who does not tell us anything about his guru. His name is Swami Anubhavananda Saraswati. He gives lectures even today at, he's probably 75 years old, but he doesn't tell anybody how old he is. Nobody knows his date of birth, nothing. Okay, because he's true Advaita follower. He says, if you tell anybody your date of birth, you are limiting yourself in time. Isn't it? So he gives a lecture at 9 o'clock every morning and 5 o'clock every evening. I just heard his 5 o'clock lecture, 5 to 6, there was a lecture. Then after that, I took a nice shower and got ready for my lecture. I am no match to what he will tell you and he will teach. Listen to his lectures. You just Google Anubhavananda Saraswati and you can join his YouTube channel. Literally hundreds, if not thousands of lectures on YouTube. Pick up any of his lecture, listen to it. At the end of it, you will feel fulfilled. You will feel great. All right. So if you have enjoyed listening to me and if you have found that these lectures have been useful to you, listen to him sometime. Then you will know I know nothing. All right. I know certain things based on my own perspective. I only shared with you my experience. I don't consider myself knowledgeable. All right. I just consider myself to be a true student, a sincere student. That's all. A sadhak.
Yeah, we'll take the question from participants.
Anybody has raised their hands?
No, I mean, we didn't announce it.
If you okay. Anyway, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. We will unmute you. Pramod, go ahead. Ask your question, please.
Yeah.
Pramod, you are live. You're online. Go ahead.
Yeah. Is using fossil fuels considered violent or non-violent?
Okay. The question is using fossil fuels considered violent or non-violent? Using anything is not violent. And using everything can be violent, depending upon how much of it you use and for what purpose you use. Okay, so if you use anything in this world at the need level, then it is not violence. But if you use anything beyond the need level, then everything is violence. So violence is basically in the attitude. All right, I have given this example in one of my previous webinars. If you see a person cutting open somebody's stomach with a knife, how will you understand this? It won't be murder most of the time. Most of the time, it will be a surgeon opening up somebody's stomach for doing some life-saving operation. So even though what you see from outside or even what you do physically may look the same, the motive with which you do that differentiates whether it is good or bad. So therefore, using fossil fuel is not bad. Using fossil fuel is not violent, but misusing fossil fuel or overusing fossil fuel is bad. So as long as it is used for benefiting the totality, and as long as it is not misused or overused or used for fueling our greed, then it is okay. The problem in this world is not our activity. The problem in this world is our greed. Hemant Rangole, Dr. Madhavi has raised her hand. So I'm going to unmute Dr. Madhavi and then we'll take Hemant after that. Dr. Madhavi, please.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, my humble namaskar to you. It's been a very wonderful session and a wonderful explanation that makes one to think more about Gita. And at this modern age, it is really very apt, I would say, that making Gita relevant to the modern day life. First of all, my humble namaskar, as I told. And what I feel is this Gita, the first shloka where it starts, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, Mama Veta
Yes.
Yursava, Mamakah Pandavaschaiva, Kima Kurvata Sanjaya. I feel strongly, whenever I start reading Gita, I go on thinking every time I get new thoughts on it. It starts from there. Unless until if Dhritarashtra was having that kind of thought, this everything would have not even happened. That selflessness, Mamaka, my people and the Pandavas. That's where it happened. We all are also in the war of me and others, myself and
Exactly.
others. That is where the root cause. And
Exactly.
as Krishna thought it is waste teaching Dhritarashtra and wasting his time, he thought he took Arjuna as his best student and
Correct.
tried incorporating in the field of ground. Wherever we
Correct.
never saw anything of such kind of lesson in the field of war, but where this is the different experience that we have from Mahabharata. It happened in the war field. The main lesson which we understand from Mahabharata through Bhagavad Gita, because he thought it is apt to make Arjuna think that you are not what you are thinking of. As you explained very well, you are not what you are devoid of all things. I am the pervading uh, oneness in everybody, that I want to explain you and make you perfect, so that you can actually think either Bhishma or either Drona or anybody in front of you as one only, and you are not doing that, I am doing in behalf of you, and you take it in that stance to make it clear.
Awesome.
And
Wonderful.
every time he will be inquiring, Dhritarashtra will be inquiring through Sanjaya. Though he is blind, he can see like a picture perfect video there with the help of Sanjaya. What is happening to my people and the Pandavas? He never said Pandav, he never treated in his mind also Pandaraja as his own brother and Pandavas as his own nephews. Otherwise, this entire thing would even not even happened.
Correct. So
Yeah.
this, what you have said is absolutely correct. In fact, this sense of otherness is the root cause of all corruption. Okay. So as long as I have this misunderstanding or this notion that I am apart from the other, I am separate from the other, then corruption will happen. Then what will happen? See, this is me. So I'm in love with myself. I will not do anything bad to myself. But the other, I can do whatever I want. So as long as there is a sense of otherness, that sense of otherness is the root cause of all corruption. So once we realize that we are not apart from the other, when we are in a perfect stage of yoga, that is when all corruption goes away. See, if Madhavi, I consider you as a part of me or as my real sister. See, this explanation I have given in one of the previous webinars. I don't remember whether I gave it in English or in Marathi. Let me repeat this. You see, we have assumed that this body is me, right? But then I just explained to you that this body was created out of the earth, right? So that's why we call the earth as our common mother, as Mother Earth. Bhumata we call her, right? And the life within us, the life principle within us, that is the father principle within us, which is common. So our body was made out of the earth, and the life we all have in common. So our mother and our father are both common. So then, Dr. Madhavi, are you not my real sister? When I look at you as my real sister, then my attitude towards you changes completely. You are the same person, but my vision, my viewpoint of looking towards you becomes different. When I see you as my sister, then will something like Nirbhaya happen? Cannot happen. So that is the way our vision changes. That's why the inner transformation takes place after we study the Gita. That's what I was telling earlier, that inner transformation takes place once we understand the world in this manner. And not just human beings. Every other creature on this planet is my brother or sister, because they all have been created from the same Mother Earth, and they all have the same Father, the life within us. Right? So how will I hurt even a small ant? The ant is a beautiful creature of nature. Ant has a beneficial role in the environment. Even a snake has a beneficial role in the environment. A dog has a beneficial role in the environment. A mosquito has a beneficial role in the environment. The coronavirus also has a beneficial role in the environment. When I understand the world in this manner, then the world doesn't bother me anymore. I'm not afraid of the world anymore. I understand that all the bad things I'm seeing in the world, or I think exist in the world, are not in the world. They are within me. So I need to clear those out. When I clear myself, the world is pure, the world is beautiful by itself. That's the kind of understanding I developed once I study the Gita from and inculcate the principles in my everyday life. So we'll take, I think Hemant had raised his hand. So Hemant, can you please unmute yourself? I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
No, he can't.
No. Can you unmute Hemant Rangole?
He's not visible.
He's not visible.
Yeah,
Hemant.
Hemant ji. Please speak, Hemant ji.
Yeah, this is Ujjwala, not Hemant here. We
Okay,
both-
Ujjwala, great to see you. Ujjwala is my other sister, huh? By the way, she is from Florida. So Ujjwala, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so thank you. It is really great to hear you. My question is, when Gita preaches selflessness, but
Yes.
why in daily life, especially at work, it's always about what's in it for me. And
Correct. So
and what I am doing, my karma, I mean, how do I make sure that whoever my superior or whoever needs to know, how do they know what I am doing so that I get what I want? So then how do you maintain this, the balance both?
correct. That's a great question. And I get asked this question a lot. How do we implement this understanding in our daily life, especially in the office? You know, we undertake, as I said, we undertake all activities, all actions with a certain end result in mind. Okay. So in fact, action is motivated by a certain end result in mind. About that, there is no problem. In fact, we should undertake actions with a certain end result in mind, but understand that we have control only over the action. We don't really have any control over the end result. All right, the end result will happen according to natural law. According to physical laws, if you drop something from the air, it will go to the ground. That is the law of gravity, natural law. Okay. In the same manner, if you undertake any activity, it is going to result in something according to natural law. Over that, you don't have any control or adhikar. All right. Now, after studying this entire Gita, if we have a sense of mindness or pride or ahamkara, as it is said in Sanskrit, then you will ask, what is in it for me? So therefore, what will happen? Whatever action I'm doing, it is for achieving a result for me, exclusively for me, or say my family or my clan or my religion or my species. When action is undertaken with this motive, then that action will not result in a good consequence at the end of it. Because see, as a human species, we have undertaken all these activities thinking that yes, this is good for humanity, this is good for all of us, fulfilling and fueling all of our desires. So we essentially extracted so much from the earth that the earth has got depleted very rapidly in the last 100-150 years. See, I give these examples because I come from environmental engineering and these examples are readily available in my mind, right? So when I undertake any activity with a selfish desire, then that activity or that action will eventually result in something bad. Okay, so when we are dealing with people in the office, okay, we all know what our role is in the organization, in the office. So if I'm working at my desk, I know what my duty is of that position. There is always a job description based on which we are hired by the organization, and we agree to fulfill the responsibilities of that job description when we offer our services to that organization, right? So our responsibility and our duty is to make sure that we fulfill all the obligations of that job description, right? Thereafter, what happens is not really in our hands. Then the boss decides, or his boss decides, or whatever. And then we get rewarded based on our effort, based on the job description to which we are, wedded basically. So this is what I would suggest, is we should be concerned about our job description and our responsibility within that job, and really let go of what the manager or the boss is thinking of. Because if you do your job sincerely, the boss will always appreciate you, because the boss looks better because of what you have done in your job, is it not? So in the office environment, rather than thinking about what am I going to get out of this, of course you are getting salary at the end of it, at the end of the month. You get salary at the end of the month. You will also get a promotion at the end of the month, but the salary and the promotion should not be the primary goal. The primary goal should be to fulfill the obligations of that job. So, I mean, these mistakes all of us make, even I have made in the past. So sometimes I would get enchanted by the glory of the position, but not really be very sincere about what I'm supposed to do in that position. So, and I have made mistakes, or I have not been successful. Even though I have tried, I may not have been successful. So then the consequence may not be very good, neither for me nor for the organization. So this is what I need to be aware of and focus on. So if I focus on the responsibilities of the job and do that joyfully, then doing that duty, doing that action, or doing that karma itself becomes joyful. And then I don't postpone that happiness and don't pin that happiness on the consequences of that action or the karma phala. That is what the law of karma means, or that is what karma yoga means. I hope this answers your question. So Varlu is the next one. I'm going to unmute, and you can go ahead and ask your question, Varlu, please.
Okay, sir. I'm Venkateshwarlu, sir. Good morning.
Namaskaram, Garu.
Namaskaram, sir. These a few slokas are there. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharati abhyudhanam atarmasya sajatmanam sadamyaham. Another is to enforce it. Another thing to emphasize it. Another thing he told paritranaya sadhunam vinayasaya cha duskritam dharma samsthapanardhaya sambhavam yuge yuge. And he still further emphasized ananya chintayanto mam yejana paryupasate tesham nityabhiktanam yoga kshemam vahayam. Very fine. He told that he will save or do something. But if you see the history, so many Genghis Khan has come, Babur has come, Alexander has come, Hitler has come. So many things have happened, but he never. It doesn't look. He bothered about all those things. Simply, if at all he is there, he participated as an onlooker, nothing more. But so many things happened. Gandhiji, if you take, he uttered morning prayer, evening prayer, and he has gone to the extent of refusing security. God is my savior. I don't need any security. But what happens to him, everybody knows. So it looks apparently he is a defaulter. Jo vada kiya wo nibhana padega. He didn't do justice to what he promised. This is one thing. Another thing is, there are so many people with so many versions of Gita. One person says this is Yadhatatam, ISKCON, for example, ours is the real Gita. Another person comes with Traita Siddhanta Bhagavad Gita. In Kerala, somebody came with not with 701, but with some other number. So there may be so many prachiptas that are added, like Ganges, and when it starts, it is pure. But when it comes to Kasi, so many drainages and all those things joined. So nobody knows. The original author, you cannot catch him. You cannot tell what is the original he told. This is another dispute. And interpretations also, though so many commentaries have come. For example, one simple thing, Nasagra, Drushti, you keep it at Nasagra. Nasagra means normally people think tip of the nose. But Paramahamsa Yogananda says, no, agra means top of the thing. Nasagra means nearly it is Bhrukuti. You should concentrate at that point. So there is a variety of interpretations, variety of claimings, and the original author is not available. So it is
All right. So let me address some of these things which you have said. I think all of these are valid, and I'll try to explain these things to you. Okay. So I'm going to put you on mute and then talk about these things. All right. So Bhagwan has declared yada yada hi dharmasya glanir-bhavati bharata abhyuthanam dharmasya tadatmanam srujamyaham. Okay. So whenever there is an excess of adharma, which means non-adherence to the natural law, then he will manifest himself. That is what he has said. All right. So why did he not manifest himself when Babar came or when somebody else came? Okay. So let us think of why something like this has happened. So let's just compare this whole thing with our own body. Okay. Why does disease happen within our body? Disease happens within our body because our body's ability to resist disease has gone down, which means my immunity has gone down. Why has my immunity gone down? Because I have utilized my body for indulging into many different things which I should not be doing, which means I have unfortunately made my body weaker, because of which disease has come. So if you see things that have happened in our country or our land or to our dharma because of external aggression and things like that, it is because our own inherent strength, our own ability to resist was down. And that ability to resist, each one of us has to develop. Okay, I cannot expect Bhagwan to appear and save me every time. Bhagwan will save me only if I am ready to be saved. All right, if I have done everything I can to save myself and then leave the result, final result to Bhagwan. See, Bhagwan was the charioteer for Arjuna. Bhagwan did not fight his battle. Every Arjuna has to fight his own battle. And once you fight your own battle under his guidance, then you will win. But if you think that you will not fight and Bhagwan will fight on your behalf, he will not fight. Right? So if I want to make sure that these things do not happen to me, then my own dharma, my own adherence to my swadharma, and my own commitment, my own hard work to fulfill that commitment has to be impeccable. If I maintain my body in a healthy condition, then disease will not manifest itself at all. Disease will only manifest itself if my own ability to resist a disease causing agent is weak. So therefore the adherence to our own dharma has been weak in our land, and that is why things happen. So if we strengthen our own dharma, if we change ourselves from within, if we become stronger within ourselves, then we will not be impacted by any agent from outside, isn't it? So that is my duty. Only when I fulfill my duty, then I can expect a good result. If I don't fulfill my duty and if I expect Bhagwan to come and help me, Bhagwan is not going to come and help me. So, and then when he comes to make sure that the people who are living according to the adharma are eliminated. So now let us look at pandemics. Now currently we are going through a pandemic, isn't it? The pandemic is not killing everybody. Only those bodies whose resistance has gone down are being eliminated by the virus. When Bhagwan said that I will appear on this earth to clear out adharma, he did not promise us that he is going to come with 2 hands, 2 legs, 1 head. like a human being? No. He can appear as Sahasra Purusha, Shirisha, Sahasrakshas, Sahasrapad. In Purusha Sukta, you might have heard. So he can have 1,000 eyes, 1,000 hands, 1,000 legs, 1,000 heads. Does coronavirus not have 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes and 1,000 heads? It may be invisible, but the structure we see, all the pictures we see in the news, it has all kinds of tentacles. And it is attacking only those bodies in which the resistance has gone down, right? Resistance goes down by many reasons. Resistance also goes down by old age, all right? So in old age, we have to be prepared to leave this body gracefully. We should not unnecessarily keep attached to this body and never want to leave. If that happens, then what will happen? Like Hiranyakashipu, we will become Rakshasa. If we understand that we are never going to leave this body, we are going to remain here forever, then we will do all kinds of adharma. And for removing that adharma, then Bhagwan has to appear as Narsimha. So in this age, Bhagwan has appeared as Karuna to eliminate all the adharma. So this is my viewpoint, okay? You don't have to agree with this. I'll tell you how nature works. See, nature works to eliminate inefficiency. I've said this before to some people, may not be to everybody. We all have seen these videos on Discovery Channel or National Geographic or whatever, that a lion or a tiger is very hungry in Africa. He chases the deer, he runs after the deer, and then 40, 50 deer are there. 49 run away, 50th deer gets caught. So which deer gets caught? The one that is the least efficient. So from that deer's point of view, the outcome or the consequence is disastrous because it got killed, right? But from nature's point of view, what nature has done is it has eliminated the inefficiency and it has promoted the efficiency. Okay, so that is what any kind of disease or any kind of such thing will do to nature. It will eliminate the inefficient. Life will not end. All 7.5 billion people on the planet will not die. Okay, the people who can resist this virus will survive. In fact, the very fact that you and I are alive today proves that our parents, their parents, they all survived all kinds of pandemics. That is why you and I are alive today, are we not? But we are not going to stay here forever. We have to leave this body also. All these avatars came, Krishna came, Rama came, Buddha came, Gandhi came, all of them went away, right? So it's not, nobody has come here permanently. This body is not permanent. The word Sharira itself means something that is going to get destroyed. That means Sharira. So we are not this Sharira. If I consider myself as Sharira, then I will have all these questions. Just think of it. Think of all of your questions once again from the point of view that you are not this body. You are the unchanging principle. Then those questions will completely get dissolved. Okay, Samir, you've been raising your hand for a long time, and Nilma also. Nilma, I'm going to wait until I think Samir was here before you, so I'm going to unmute him. Samir, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me, doctor?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. My question is, the Bhagavad Gita was revealed to Arjuna by Lord Krishna. One of its sayings or truths were that Brahmana and dog eater are the same, on the same level. The Western civilization says that first the monkeys came and then from them the humans came. The Bhagavad Gita says that we have to adhere to dharma. The Bhagavad Gita says we have to adhere to dharma. The Western civilization says that if I have more money, if I have more power, then you have to bow before me, or you have to bow before that those who are more powerful. The Bhagavad Gita says that we have to do nishkam karma, whereas the Western civilization says that might is right. If then I will fight, and therefore I will propagate my civilization. Probably that's the reason that Bhagavad Gita was not propagated throughout the world. Why is it that when we practice our Vedas and our study the Vedas or study Bhagavad Gita, we time and again come up against a wall of Western civilization, where the idea is totally different. So my question is, what should we follow? The Western civilization mode of thought, or our Vedic thought system? Your answer, Doctor.
All right, great. So whether we should follow the Western civilization or Western thought, or whether we should follow the Vedic thought. See, we have done the experiment of following the Western thought or Western civilization in the past 100, 200 years, right? We have also adopted that system in India. You know, we've done free market economy and all those things. We've opened up the economy in the past, say 25, 30 years. You see, after this coronavirus pandemic and this crisis, hopefully we will all, the whole civilization, I'm not saying Western versus Eastern or whatever, we have to look at, we have never made this distinction, by the way. In Vedanta, there is no distinction. Vedanta does not consider Western, Eastern, rich, poor, black, white, no such distinctions. Vedanta emphatically says that everything is one, and whatever differentiation we see in the world is only a manifestation. Okay, it's not real. So in my mind, I don't see any distinction, Western, Eastern, black, white, Indian, American. See, I am an American citizen just because I happen to live in America. I have an American passport, but I don't distinguish myself as American, Indian, European, black, white, brown, nothing. Okay. My outward manifestation is only that, only a manifestation, right? Truth is only one. So once we understand this, then all of these differences, all of these distinctions dissolve in our mind. The only reason we see these distinctions, these differences, is because I haven't got rid of them from my own mind yet. So once I get rid of them from my own mind, then this question of Western, Eastern, all of these things will not even arise in my mind. In fact, when I meet people, I meet Americans all the time, right? I have American neighbors, and they are like my sisters, basically. They are my brothers. I treat them like that, and they see me like that because they see that I treat them like that. So they behave with me exactly like that. So in my mind, personally, there is no distinction. All these distinctions are useful in daily life. It's not that they are not useful. All right. But then inherently, I understand that these distinctions, these differences are only in my mind. They are not in reality. So once I understand this, then these questions go away from my mind. Okay, I'm going to take Nilima's question now. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Nilima, please.
Thank you, Doctor. I had a very personal question here regarding this. After listening to you on this Gita's and Upanishads thing, is it the question is, how do I balance my dream, my goal, and my duty when they are expected me to go in two different directions? So how do I stay focused and be disciplined to manage both?
That's a great question. I think I answered this question in response to Ujjwala previously. See, when my goal and the overall goal, they are not going in the same direction, that is when we have conflict. That is when we have a problem, isn't it? So when my personal goal is in tune with or is dovetailed with the larger goal, then we are all going in the same direction. See, right now, the largest distinction we have, or the largest group we see in the world, is a nation, right? So we are divided amongst various nations. So as long as what we are doing is in line with what the national objective is, and then as long as the nation is also pursuing its goals not against other nations, but in cooperation with or with a larger vision in mind, then those activities or those policies or those things we have to undertake. Our actions should be inclusive, not exclusive. So even when we are working in the office or in an organization, what we do for the organization has to be in line with the overall goal of the organization. If it is not, if my personal goal is against the goal of the organization, then I should leave that organization and I should look for an organization where my goal and the organization's goal are in line with each other. Only then it will work. Otherwise you will feel unhappy in that organization. Dr. Madhavi, please.
Sir, hello.
Yes, Dr. Madhavi.
Yeah. The previous question which somebody was raising about Western civilization and Indian one, it is clearly mentioned as Ekam Satvipra Bahuda Vadanti. Once
Correct.
you know that, nobody will have any such question. For that, at least first, we should actually understand what is there for us. Then we can talk about Westerners. Definitely, they would not know. But most of the Westerners these days, as you said, I also stayed in US so many years. They know better than us actually. They are reading and they are going in depth. Where we are thinking here, what did Krishna do? What is Western civilization? What is that origin and what is our origin? It clearly mentioned Ekam Sadvipra Bahuda Vadanti. It is one, and the other person, most of the scholars are saying it is many, but it is only one. That is Advaita. There is nothing, no non-duality in that. That is clear. And for that, we have to actually enlighten ourselves. Go read Gita, even if you don't understand also. Just make it a Parayana habit. Slowly, one great person like you will come one day and explain them in detail. And the other question, somebody were asking about Krishna didn't help those Genghis Khan all those days. And somebody were asking about my goals in the office are not matching with myself and officer is not recognizing me, all that. We ourselves, Krishna clearly mentioned in Daivasra Sampad Vibhaga Yoga, Krishna clearly mentioned, right? You should become pure like Deva, not Asuri qualities. We all think that, no, I'm thinking about Krishna and I'm praying to Krishna, I'm going to temple, I'm serving 1, 2, 3 people and I'm announcing my dana on public or something like that, some charities or some works. We all think, even including me or anybody who are doing that, we think that, okay, most of the Daivi qualities I got. But this is not the Daivi quality what Krishna told. It is beyond that. We are still struggling in that Asuri quality only, but good part is those who are doing Nama Japa of Krishna and thinking about Krishna and doing all that stuff, slowly they are in that path. Once you attain Daivi Guna Sampatti, once you are attaining, you don't have any thinking of, okay, I am doing this for the company, I am doing this for myself, I am not getting benefited, Krishna is not taking care, this pandemic is going on. You clearly mentioned immunity, those who are less with that immunity, definitely they will get vanished in this. Why somebody are not caring for, why somebody are only following good lifestyle, all that, it is up to one's own choice of activities that they are doing. So this
actually, you know, Madhavi, by the way, even those who are following the good lifestyle and healthy lifestyle and all that, they are also going to die. Huh? I am prepared to die. I'm going to die someday. I know that.
Exactly.
And all of us are going to die. All right. I
Exactly.
wish everybody a long life.
We are not permanent here. Krishna,
Correct.
he was permanent. He, after entire thing, he just went because of one hunter's arrow, which is like unbelievable. But it was destined like that. We are not, why he mentioned the story, whether it might be true or not, we don't care. But what we have to take from it is, definitely it is everybody's life is this much on this ground, in that you actually accumulate the Daivi Guna in that and think about selflessness. And then if you're not getting, leave it to karma and think about, okay, one day it will happen or it will not happen. But I'm inside me, I'm happy. that whatever I did. I'm not in the band of Genghis Khan. I'm not in the band of Babur. I'm in the band of Shivaji Maharaj. What is the wrong in it? Shivaji Maharaj,
Exactly.
till today I am praying to Shivaji. I never saw him. And even the temple that he built in Pune, that is the thing very sacred to me. I feel Ganesha is in there. Because
Wonderful.
I made Shivaji like such a picture in me, because he fought with Babur, he fought with everybody, whoever you name in his period. He has got
Great.
all the Daivi qualities. Daivi qualities is not something that you give so many charities, you do so many homas, yajnas, all that. You have that quality. If someone is coming to you, you are there to fight for your dharma. That is the Daivi guna.
Great.
If
So
the
see,
person-
from all these stories, you know, what you have said is correct, absolutely, and I completely agree with you. From all these stories, from the stories of these great masters, and also from the Gita, the lessons we need to learn are: how can I change my life? How can I change my life's experience today? See, all of these things have happened in the past. It doesn't exist anymore. What exists is right now.
Exactly.
What exists is me. What exists is
Yeah.
you. You are that. So you
Exactly.
have to
For
get
that,
transformed.
we need to use Gita for that. Instead of
Right.
questioning Krishna, who are we to question? He is the pervading universe all around. Everything you breathe, you talk, you walk, everything. It is because of some may not be Krishna, but somebody else, whoever you
Great,
believe.
wonderful. You know, I think Sudhir, you should ask Dr. Madhavi to do a webinar one time. We will listen to her views. It will be very nice.
No. It is really great.
One day.
No.
And that's fine. But then let me talk to, I think Bharat is raising his hand. So I'm going to unmute Bharat. Go ahead, Bharat, please.
So my question is about second and third adhyay of the Gita. I started listening to the explanation, but two words on which I was not clear, and those were Yajna and Agni. So what do they exactly mean in the context of human life? I would like to know more about that.
Great. So Yajna means different things to different people. Yajna is basically sacrifice. All right. So there is a verse in the second chapter that says, Annad bhavanti bhutani parjanyadanna sambhava yajnat bhavati parjanyo yajna karma samudbhava. So the karma we do is the yajna. All right. So what I'm doing right now is basically a vag yajna. Okay. So I'm telling you something, or I'm talking about something. If I do this activity in the spirit of offering to the divine, that is called yajna. Okay. And when we eat, he says in the 15th chapter, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayuktaha Pachamyannam Chaturvidam. So he says, I am the digestive fire within you, which is digesting all the food you are eating. So when we say our prayer in Marathi, Udara Bharana Nohe Janije Yajna Karma, right? So the process of eating is not just fully filling our stomach, but it is a yajna, a sacrificial offering to the Vaishwanar, which is the digestive fire within us, isn't it? So that is yajna. And when you do the yajna, then you become eligible to get something for yourself. So it says in another verse, yajna shishtashinas santo bhunjate sarva kilbishai, right? So you should do the yajna, you should perform the sacrifice, you should do your own duty first and then expect something in return. And whatever is achieved from the yajna, that you take with great humility and with gratitude as the prasada of the Lord. Because you know that the results of the action are not under your control. They are under the control of the natural law. So whatever happens at the end of our action, whatever karma you perform, at the end of it, whatever result you get, you accept that result as a divine gift to yourself, right? Because it has happened because of all these things lining up together and coming together. So that is karma yoga. Karmanyeva adhikar aste, theek hai. You know, you have adhikar, control only over your actions. What is that action? The yajna karma. So any work you do in the spirit of service, in the spirit of duty, without any selfish desire is called yajna. That is the meaning of yajna. Okay. And the other thing you had asked for was Agni, was it?
I think
So was it Agni? I think I can't remember whether he says yajna and there was one other word he had asked me. So Agni is the fire, right? So fire can be at various places. Fire is outside in the sun. Fire is also within me. Fire is the digestive fire that keeps this life going. Okay, fire is a principle. So that fire principle I have to always keep alive. I should not douse the fire within me. Okay.
Yeah.
That fire within the system gets doused by overeating the food, by the way. So if you keep if you limit the amount of food you eat, then the digestive fire keeps burning all the time. Then it can digest anything. So let me repeat some of the rules which I have said in the past. Number 1 rule, don't eat unless you are hungry. Number 2, when you sit down to eat, don't fill up your stomach more than 50% with food. And number 3, between meals, you leave enough gap so that you are really hungry the next meal. And overnight, you fast for 12, 14, 16 hours, as many hours as you can. Until you get really hungry, the next time in the morning, don't eat. Don't eat unless you are hungry. Don't drink unless you are thirsty. You follow these rules, then you will be healthy throughout your life. Also do some exercise, which you do, Bharat. You do Surya Namaskar. You have learned how to do them well. So I'm glad you are doing that. So we should all do all these things, continue to do that. As long as we have this body, we have to continue to do these things. All right. And at the same time, study the Gita so that we know what we should do in our life, what we should do for the society, what we should do for our family. Those things are also clearly mentioned in the Gita.
Yeah.
So who else is there? Sumedha is there. Sumedha, shall I unmute you? Sumedha, please go ahead and ask your question.
Dr. Saab, good evening.
Yes.
This is Sandeep Thodankar from Ichalkandi.
Okay, Sandeep, great to see you. Go ahead, please ask your question.
This is another part of this pandemic is we have karma, means we are doing karma or yajna, that is common. We are sitting at home, everybody. We are doing exercises. Okay, this is all common, and we have stopped our consumptions. So any actions leading to getting us pure air and healthy living, good water, so rivers are clean and good environment is around, so actions are common, so world over. So one perspective is that looking at is commonly doing these actions and getting good fruits. Is it not so?
Yes, absolutely. So you see what has happened, luckily, because of this pandemic, all human beings have come together. So we have started looking at ourselves as one race, all right, or one species. The entire species has come together finally. You see, in the last couple of months, you will see that there have not been too many, terrorist activities, this activity, that activity, right? Because all of us have come together to fight this one enemy, so-called enemy, right? So this is one good thing that has happened because of this crisis. We have all come together and we are all thinking about all of ourselves as together, as one species, all right? And what should we do? And we have seen some results by limiting our activities, by living more simply, by living without a number of things. The environment has improved. So if we learn this lesson and limit our activities, not pollute the environment with the kind of arrogance we have been doing for the past 100, 150 years, if we stop doing that, then the earth and the environment is pure. It's wonderful. So if we can learn this lesson collectively as humanity, but you see, I cannot force anybody else to learn that lesson. I have to learn that lesson myself. You see, I'll give an example. If there are 100 mangoes and there are 100 people, then what will be the equitable distribution of that? Everybody should have one mango, right? That will be equitable. But if even one of those people wants more than one mango because of greed, because of whatever, then it is clear that the remaining 99 will get less than one mango fractionally, isn't it? What the Gita tells us is having more than one mango is bad, not for those 99 people, but for myself. Once I understand this, then I start living in this manner with this understanding on my own voluntarily through self-discipline rather than because of any force. So it is my hope that we learn these lessons through this so-called adversity. I don't see this as an adversity at all. I see this entire 2-month lockdown period as a great opportunity for us to learn. If we learn from this experience, then not only will the society be benefited, the world be benefited, the environment be benefited, but even I will be benefited. So my benefit, my good, what is good for me is actually what is good for all of us. That is what I need to understand, I need to learn, and I need to be committed for. So that's what I would do at the end of this. Okay, Samir, you still have your hand up, so I'm going to unmute you again. Go ahead and ask your question. I can hear you. Samir, are you there? Samir Supnekar?
No, he left, I think.
He left. All right. So who else wanted to say? Anybody else raising their hands?
Hello.
Yeah, Samirji.
Yes, Samir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. By civilization, I meant the ideas that are propagated by an entire state, not 1 or 2 people or 5 or 10 people. That is that you see on YouTube also. My question really was that Gita tells us to adhere to dharma, whereas maybe some civilization might force us to adhere to adharma. So in such a case, what are we supposed to do? Should we oppose that adharma, or should we oppose Genghis Khan, or should we accept adharma?
We
You
should
answer,
not
Doctor.
accept adharma at all. What you are saying is correct. We
That is
should
what I'm
not
saying.
accept the adharma at all. In fact, you see, why did Shivaji, Sambhaji, all these people arise in our land?
Correct.
See, in fact, Sambhaji chose to die, and he was tortured to death by his captors, right? But he refused to adhere to adharma. He refused to give up his swadharma, which is okay. See, those people were so brave, they understood that adhering to adharma is worse than death. So they chose death rather than adharma. So somebody standing up for dharma and making sure that as long as that person is alive, or as long as I am alive, I need to stick to dharma. I need to make sure that I follow the dharma. And in the process of following dharma, if my body disappears, so be it. That's what Krishna also says. He says it is better to adhere to your swadharma and lose your life than to adhere to adharma. So you are absolutely right. I agree with you. Any other comments or questions, Sudhir? Or maybe we have
no, the comment
exhausted all the questions now.
Yeah. I mean, can we expect a similar session on Ramayana?
Similar session on Ramayana?
That was one comment.
Maybe you should ask somebody else, why should I speak all the time? Maybe somebody who's a scholar on Ramayana who can speak. I can again speak about Ramayana the way it has impacted my life, or how I understand some of these things and how they have changed me. You see, Ramayana is a history that has happened many years ago. But how is that history relevant to me today? How does it impact my life? That is more important. I have a question here from Nipa Joshi. It says, wanted to know what Gita's view on veganism. You see, we should not follow any ism. When we follow an ism, then that ism is different from any other or every other ism. Gita tells us to do what is necessary to be done at this time, wherever we are. So I happen to be mostly vegan. I eat very little dairy. I don't eat any meat or poultry. I eat ghee as a medicine, as I have told before. So I'm not opposed to eating animal products as long as we eat them in very small quantities or to the extent it is necessary as a medicine. So Gita doesn't say veganism. Gita talks about ahimsa. And ahimsa means not consuming anything more than what you need, what you require. So I gave the example of 100 mangoes and 100 people, right? So Gita tells me that there is no way I should take more than one mango. That is ahimsa. So there is no, Gita doesn't give us any strict do's and don'ts. All right. The only thing Gita tells us is you should follow your Swadharma. You should find out what your Swadharma is. And that Swadharma you will find out if you are sincere in your seeking. If you are sincere in your seeking, if you have a deep desire, if you have a strong desire to learn the truth, truth will be revealed to you. Then you will know whether veganism is good for you or not. Forget about the whole world. Don't change the whole world, change yourself. Webinar on Veda Shastra by Dr. Vikram. I don't know Vedas. I don't know Veda Shastra. Samir, you are having too many expectations from me. All right. How to find my Swadharma, sir? Nipa Joshi is asking. How to find my Swadharma? That's a good question. You see, Swadharma means whatever is natural to you at any given time. All right. So if you do what is natural to you, what you feel good doing, but not undertaken with any selfish desire. Okay. If doing something with a selfish desire feels natural to you, that's not dharma. Okay. So you should expand yourself. You should not contract yourself. You should not limit yourself to this body. You know, you are born in a certain family. So doing things for your family is a natural duty. You are born in a society. So doing things for the society is your natural duty. You are born in a nation. So doing things for the nation is your natural duty. You are born on this planet. So doing something for the planet is your natural duty. So that is your Swadharma. So Swadharma is doing something that is beneficial for the larger entity than just for myself. That is Swadharma. Can you give a separate webinar on Adhyaya 15 of the Gita? Yeah, I can give a separate webinar on Adhyaya 15 of the Gita because that is something I contemplate on all the time. So I'm happy to speak about that. So we'll see.
We'll plan for next week, next Sunday.
No problem.
Yeah.
Any other points I have not covered?
I think we covered almost all.
All right, great. Wonderful. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. There is one new message says thank you. All right, great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sudhir, for giving me this opportunity to talk to everybody again.
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to come back with a different webinar next time.
Yeah. Thank you for your session, webinar, sharing your experiences, which we always emphasize on the natural cooling groups. And, you know, the most important is how it is relevant to our present life. That is most interesting because most youngsters and we are in dilemma whether to follow modern or Indian way of living or Vedic way of living. But we don't get as much support or much guidance. Another thing is how to understand the Veda, Bhagavad Gita. Third thing is how to put the essence of the Bhagavad Gita into our real life. And today you covered all those questions, and I mean basically the question and answers really helping us to get to the real point. Thanks to the participants and thanks to the presenter. With this, today we'll conclude today's webinar. Thank you all.